Namaskar. Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host 𝙒𝙖𝙩𝙤, and joining me again today is Salvatore Babones, and we talked about this the last time that we will take up a little bit more of an in-depth look at integral humanism and how it is similar or different from Hindutva. We'll also touch upon a little bit about whether RSS kind of an organization, was it the first one or were there predecessors? So let's welcome the guest of the afternoon, Professor Salvatore Babones. Professor Babones, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel.
Mahadev, it's a pleasure to be
Har
back.
Har Mahadev, sir. I'm sorry I cut you off. I thought you were done, but I do this thing all the time. Professor Babones, last time we had a fantastic conversation. We talked about 𝙒𝙬𝙤𝙦𝙤𝙤, integral humanism, and a fair amount of stuff about what you do as a sociologist. Today, let's take a little bit more of a deeper dive into integral humanism and Hindutva. How much of Hindutva do you find in integral humanism, and where are the differences and where are the similarities? Take it away, sir.
First, it's difficult to go too deeply into integral humanism because 𝙒𝙬𝙤𝙦𝙤𝙦 didn't leave an enormous amount of detail about the philosophical stance. It's really just a sketch, and unfortunately his life was cut short before he was able to more fully develop the parameters of the philosophy. But if it's related at all to Hindutva, it's related in the sense that it is inspired by or perhaps informed by 𝙤𝙧𝙤𝙦's own Hinduness, which is to say it is not itself tied to what's come to be known as Hindutva or to Savarkar's book on Hindutva. And I know there are many varieties of Hindutva, but it's through Savarkar that we've come to understand Hindutva as a formal philosophical program. And integral humanism really doesn't come out of that. Now, you can call it Hindutva in the sense that, if you simply take Hindutva to mean Hinduness, then I think integral humanism is a philosophy that might only have come out of a Hindu heritage. It is not. It's a very different approach from a Christian humanism, for example, which tends to be Christian humanism or humanism in the secular European world. The post-Christian European world tends to be much more individualistic than integral humanism. So it does come out of, you can say that it's broadly speaking Hindu inspired, but I wouldn't say that it is directly related to Hindutva as we have come to understand Hindutva in the tradition coming from Savarkar.
Have you looked at, places like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa civilizations or Dholavira civilizations, the concept of guild?
The concept of guild?
Yes.
No, I haven't. Look, I don't study ancient civilizations. I mean, I'm familiar with the broad connection between the idea of guild and the idea of jati, but I don't think that really enters into this. I mean, integral humanism, as put forward by 𝙤𝙧𝙤𝙦, and for that matter, even Hindutva, as put forward by Savarkar, are very modern philosophies. And it may sound strange for me to call Savarkar a very modern figure, but after all, despite his inspiration coming from ancient India, he was very much a modernizer. Both of these men were modernizers, wanting to look to the future, maybe in taking inspiration from the past, but nonetheless forging a picture of what a future of India would be, not just even India, a future for humanity might be.
The reason, I guess I kind of gave you out of left field question. The reason I asked was that concept of guild existed till very recently. I mean, there is a place now called Food Corporation of India, which essentially stores grains for all the farmers. Sure. But before that, how did they manage? That is why I was trying to come to that. And these are all concepts that developed at a very low level, at a village level. And amazingly, you see the same thing over and over again and again. So how did the communication come through thousands of years ago when they said that this is what is good? Like, there used to be a common grazing land. Can you believe it, Salvatore? Common grazing land for the entire village. Anyone's cows can come and graze there. Anyone's, whatever, grass-fed, lamb, sheep, whatever it was. and those nobody ever claimed that land, nobody ever built anything on it, nobody constructed anything on it. I'm just amazed by some of the things that have been in place for a long time.
But these kind of adaptations are forgive me, not uniquely Indian, right? So we all know about the commons in England, right? So these are, I mean, these are responses to the world in which we live, and the world in which we live is the same world, whether you're Hindu, Christian, Muslim, or anything. And it's not surprising that people have come to, just like guilds as a solution to how we organize employment, these approaches have arisen again and again because they're simply answers to the same human challenges we face all over the world.
True. I read your article in First Post about the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, and I was amazed at the amount of research that went into writing of that article. I mean, for those viewers who have not read this book, I'll try this article. I'll try to put the link of First Post in the description section so you can read it. But Salvatore, amazing that in the 19th century, there was a similar organization halfway across the world. Talk to us a little bit about that, sir.
Well, not just one similar organization, but this was the archetype for the organization. So the RSS, from a sociological standpoint, is what we call a national rejuvenation movement. And it's not the only national rejuvenation movement. We might think of the Arya Samaj in India, or the Ramakrishna mission in India as being other forms of national rejuvenation movements, attempting to combine, some form of education, usually physical fitness, usually religious reform, with very much a modern focus, with the idea of shaping a nation for the future. And this idea of creating a nation is something that goes back at least to early 19th century Germany. And Father Jan, he's called Father Jan, he wasn't a priest, he was actually a teacher. Father Jan, who started a gymnastics movement called the Turnverein. The Turnverein, it's literally just the turning association. Turning as in, if you think, what gymnasts do on a bar? They turn around and do flips on the bars. He essentially invented modern gymnastics. And all of the parallel bars, the uneven bars, the pommel horse, these are all exercise tools invented by Father Jan in the early 19th century in Germany. Now, his Turnverein was explicitly a German nation-building organization. He wanted to mold young men for the creation of a German nation. Much like India much like India in the time of the RSS in the 1920s, Germany in the 1820s, 100 years earlier, was occupied by a foreign power. In the case of Germany, it was France. It was divided into many different polities, so there was not a single country called Germany. He said there were many, may I call them, petty princes, scattered around what's today Germany. So Prussia was its own country. Munich in Bavaria was its own country. Bohemia was its own country. Essen was its own country. And he wanted to create a pan-German movement to mold young men in the spirit of a German nation. And they would get together once a week. They would do physical exercise because he believed physical fitness was essential to the formation of a new nation, to fight the French. So physical fitness was a big part of it, but also singing nationalist songs, almost in a way like what we might think of today as a summer camp experience, except it was a weekly meeting, not so different from a shaka. Now, the content was very different from a shaka, in the sense that a shaka, of course, will be very Hindu-inspired, an RSS shaka, whereas Father Jan's Turnverein weekly meetings were very Christian-inspired, and they would use Christian language in their meetings. But the overall structure, the idea that bringing young men together to practice physical fitness, sing patriotic songs, and develop a sense of a shared nationhood while under foreign occupation, that idea, is very similar. And again, just like with the rise of guilds and jati in India, which is really ultimately just a form of guild, arises out of a form of guild. Just like the rise of guilds, just like the rise of common lands, this idea of developing a nation-building organization out of weekly camps for young men is something that's arisen again and again. Father Jan is thought of as the founder of the idea, but I wouldn't be very surprised if Dr. 𝙤𝙧𝙤𝙪, who was obviously a very educated person, who was aware of former models of nationalism. After all, people in his circle, Savarkar had written an entire book about Mazzini, the Italian nationalist from the 19th century. So people in his circle were very aware of developments in 19th century Europe. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he had read about this. After all, it's a very famous movement in Europe, not so much known in India, but it doesn't mean that we don't take inspiration from each other.
Absolutely. And I think we should also mention at this point here that Bal Gangadhar Tilak had done something similar in that he wanted people to assemble, but without making it look to the British that he was assembling them to rise against or do anything against the British. So what he did was he started celebrating all the festivals, and Ganapati festival was a big one that he really conceived. And even today, you can see the excitement with which the Ganapati festival is celebrated across India. So that was, I think, a few decades ahead of RSS.
Right. Oh, yes. The RSS is not unique in this sense at all. The reason I focused on the RSS in the article is not only obviously the current prominence of the RSS,
yes,
but the very interesting fact that the first shakas organized by Dr. 𝙤𝙧𝙤𝙪, they recruited participants from among the Hanuman temple societies. Mm-hmm. And of course, Hanuman is the god of gymnastics, among other things. It was really striking to me that the early RSS recruitment having that strong connection to gymnastic exercise was just such a parallel that I couldn't resist writing an article.
True. Absolutely spot on. I mean, if you had to come up with a name for a gymnasium, which is actually in Sanskrit, it's Vyayam Shala or exercise place. And almost the default name is Hanuman Vyayam Shala. You will find this name everywhere in India.
Yeah, but there are other organizations in other countries. I mean, of course, the RSS always hates hearing about connections to the Muslim Brotherhood, but in many ways, the original Muslim Brotherhood, I'm not talking about today and how it's evolved over the last 150 years, but the original Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt was in many ways had a similar foundation in resistance to Ottoman rule as an Egyptian nationalist organization, an Arab nationalist organization in Egypt. Of course, it's gone a completely different direction from the RSS under different social pressures. But in Japan, we see this associated with the Meiji Restoration, which again was connected to not exactly gymnastics, but to military exercise. That is, the kinds of exercises that troops would do to prepare for battle. So, how to, hold the firearm, marching and drilling in order. Well, the Meiji Restoration in Japan was, again, a movement to organize youth around exercise, to get, out with the old practices and in with a new form. Again, embracing Japanese religion. The Meiji Restoration very much embraced Shintoism. It's very much embedded in traditional Japanese culture. It's called the Meiji Restoration because it was a restoration of the old, not a throwing out of the old and creating, not a revolutionary organization, but a traditionalist organization, dedicated to modernity. And I think that's the message I'd like to get across to everyone who's not that familiar with the RSS, is that from a comparative perspective, it's very much an organization dedicated to the modernization of India, not an organization dedicated to somehow bringing India back into the past.
Absolutely spot on there, Professor Babones, and it was a pleasure talking to you and listening to you today, sir. And viewers, we would like to have Professor Babones come back again in a couple of weeks' time. And in your comments, you can perhaps, suggest us a few topics. I mean, Salvatore and I will talk about it also. At the same time, we want to really engage your minds also to try and think what you think we should be talking about. And we do some preparation also, at least Professor Babones does. I know how to ask questions, I guess. But thank you so much, Professor Babones. And viewers, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click on the bell button for notifications. Namaskar.